How does a city built for peace become a city of the dead? How do the very men anointed to protect the innocent end up turning their own capital into a literal graveyard? We aren't talking about a foreign invader or a bloodthirsty pagan empire. This is the story of the throne of David. This is Jerusalem, the holy city. These were the chosen kings, the sons of the covenant, who traded their divine crown for a dark, eternal curse. What could drive a man of God to fill the streets of his kingdom with the blood of his own people until there was no room left to walk? Imagine a Jerusalem where the air is thick, not with the smell of incense, but with the heavy, bitter scent of burning wood and the stench of decay. Under a sickly purple moon, the only sound is the clink of bronze shackles and the whispers of forbidden sorcery. Look at their faces. One king is paralyzed by a terror so deep he would sacrifice his own son to stop it. The other, he is smiling. For King Manasseh, the graveyard wasn't a tragedy, it was his masterpiece. This is the dark chronicle of King Ahaz and King Manasseh. One fell through fear, the other rose through rebellion. Together they would push a nation to the brink of total annihilation. But in the middle of this graveyard, a secret was hidden that no one saw coming, a moment of redemption that would change everything. The shadow of the Assyrian Empire loomed over the horizon like a gathering storm, cold and relentless. To the north, the kings of Aram and Israel had forged a desperate alliance, their steel pointed directly at the heart of Jerusalem. Within the palace walls, young King Ahaz did not stand with the iron resolve of his ancestors. Instead, his heart trembled like the leaves of a forest in a gale. Every messenger brought news of encroaching death, and the air grew heavy with the suffocating weight of impending siege. God's prophet, Isaiah, stood before him, urging a calm spirit and a trust in the divine. But for Ahaz, the silence of heaven was deafening compared to the roar of advancing chariots. Paralyzed by political terror, his faith finally shattered, and in that dark fracture, the chosen king began to look toward forbidden altars for his survival. The sky over Jerusalem bled a deep, bruised purple as King Ahaz descended into the jagged depths of the Valley of Hinnom. Here the air was thick and suffocating, choked by the acrid scent of burning wood and the low, rhythmic beat of drums that seemed to pulse from the earth itself. Before him loomed the bronze silhouette of Moloch, its metallic arms outstretched and glowing white-hot from the raging furnace within. Trembling, not with holy awe, but with a coward's desperation, the chosen king looked down at the innocent face of his own son. In a moment that shattered the heavens, he chose the shadow over the light. As he placed the child into the searing embrace of the idol, the transition from king to monster was complete. The first grave was dug, and the curse was finally set in motion. The blood of the innocent had not bought the peace Ahaz craved, it only beckoned a greedier predator from the east. Desperate to secure his crumbling borders, the king turned his eyes toward the one place left untouched, the house of the Lord. With trembling hands and a heart hardened by cowardice, he ordered the temple doors breached, not for worship, but for plunder. The sacred gold that once reflected the glory of God was stripped from the walls, and the holy vessels were hacked into pieces to satisfy the tribute of Assyria. He traded the holy soil of his ancestors for a fragile, blood-stained truce, essentially selling the soul of Judah to buy a few more days on a hollow throne. The chosen king had become a common thief in his own father's house. The darkness that had taken root in the Valley of Hinnom finally reached the threshold of the holy place. King Ahaz, now fully surrendered to his fear and his foreign masters, committed the ultimate desecration. He did not merely ignore the God of his fathers, he sought to silence him. With a heavy, hollow thud, the massive doors of the temple were swung shut and barred, cutting Jerusalem off from the presence of the Almighty. The sacred lamps were extinguished, the incense altars grew cold, and the once vibrant courts fell into a ghostly silence. In their place, Ahaz erected altars on every street corner, demanding that the people bow to the gods of the wind and the fire. The spiritual heart of the nation stopped beating, and a thick, unnatural shadow settled over the land, as the chosen king officially declared heaven closed. When Ahaz finally descended into the silence of the grave, a flicker of hope stirred within the darkened heart of Judah. His son, Hezekiah, ascended the throne not with the trembling hands of a coward, but with the iron will of a reformer. With a single command, the barred doors of the temple were swung open, allowing the light of heaven to spill once more across the cold stone floors. Hezekiah moved through the land like a cleansing fire, shattering the high places and crushing the bronze serpents his father had idolized. For a brief, shining season, the chosen people remembered their name, and the scent of holy incense replaced the stench of the valley. Yet even as the temple songs returned, a deeper shadow waited in the wings of history. The light of reform was brilliant, but it was fragile, a solitary candle burning against the encroaching night of what was to come. But as Hezekiah slept with his fathers, the candle was snuffed out by a son who did not inherit his father's heart. Manasseh ascended the throne at the tender age of 12, but the darkness he unleashed over the next 55 years was mature and calculating. Unlike Ahaz, who was driven by the frantic tremors of fear, Manasseh chose rebellion as a cold, ambitious pursuit. He did not merely copy the neighbors, he became the architect of a new demonic order, rebuilding the very altars his father had torn down. He bowed to the starry hosts and invited the occult into the royal court, consulting mediums and spiritists as if they were his closest advisors. Under his hand, the chosen line became a conduit for the cursed, as he intentionally designed a kingdom where the living God was an exile in his own city. The systemic rebellion of the cursed king soon moved from the shadows of the occult into the light of the public square. Under Manasseh's command, the value of life collapsed beneath the heavy weight of idolatry. No longer content with the ritual fires of the valley, the king unleashed a wave of terror that turned the holy city into a literal slaughterhouse. History records that he murdered so many innocent people that Jerusalem was filled from one end to the other with blood. The very streets that once echoed with the Psalms of David now ran red, the stones themselves becoming a testament to a crown that had completely abandoned its calling. The throne that was meant to protect life had become a platform for murder, ensuring that every corner of the city bore the cold, silent mark of the grave. The heavens, long insulted by the cursed king's arrogance, finally broke their silence with the thunder of an approaching storm. The commanders of Assyria arrived not as diplomats, but as the grim instruments of divine verdict. In the very streets he had flooded with innocent blood, Manasseh was brought low, his royal robes stripped and his pride shattered. There was no dignity in his fall. The Assyrians fastened a cruel hook into his nose and bound his wrists in heavy, biting bronze shackles. As he was dragged toward the distant gates of Babylon, the people he had led into darkness watched in a stunned, terrifying silence. The architect of the graveyard had become its most pathetic prisoner, a shackled ghost haunted by the echoes of his own rebellion as he began the long, agonizing march into exile. In the cold, heavy silence of a Babylonian dungeon, the cursed king finally encountered the God he had spent a lifetime defying. Stripped of his crown and broken by the weight of his chains, Manasseh's arrogance dissolved into a desperate, weeping humility. In an act of mercy that defied all human logic, the Lord heard his cry and restored the shackled prisoner to his throne. Manasseh returned to Jerusalem not as an architect of death, but as a gardener of life, frantically tearing down the idols he had once cherished and casting them out like refuse. He rebuilt the holy altar and called his people back to the light, proving that even a graveyard can witness a resurrection. Though the scars of his reign remained, his final breath was a testament to a grace that reaches deeper than any grave.